we'll we'll continue the next topic in the environment law. So basically, in terms of doing good for the environment, there are three aspects. One is preservation, another one is conservation, and protection. So there is a need for preservation, and there is need for conservation, and there is a need for protection with respect to environment, natural resources, and the biodiversity. So first, we'll look at the meaning of these three: protection, conservation, and preservation. So, in terms of protection, uh, basically protection means keeping safe or guard from danger, enemies, and against attack. The word protect means to cover, shield, or defend from danger, harm, or injury. Okay, so basically, there is a high level of need in terms of ensuring that not only for our own present scenario but also for future scenarios, we need to ensure protection of the environment. So basically, we need to uh, protect the environment by way of covering, having a shield, and or defending uh, from any kind of danger, harm, or injury. So that is protection of the environment. And in terms of preservation, to preserve means keep safe from harm or danger, keep from decay, risk of going bad, retain, to recure, to uphold. So preservation means the act of keeping safe from injury, harm, or destruction. And the words protection, preservation, and conservation carry almost all the similar meaning of keeping in existence without a loss, ensuring that there is proper existence without any uh, possible loss. So, if we see conservation, the term conservation is derived from two Latin words, con meaning together, and servare. These are the Latin words, both con, con, and servare, servare. So these two Latin words together have come to the word of conservation in English. So con, as I just mentioned, is together, and servare means to keep or guard. So and thus together is to keep together. So, okay, these two words together would mean to keep together. So the dictionary meaning of the word conservation is an act of preservation. The term conservation was proposed by individual by name of Gifford Pinchot in the year 1908. So, Professor H.M. Rose defined conservation as the optimum allocation of natural, human, and cultural resources in the scheme of national development, whereby maximum economic and social security will be ensured or assured. He says that conservation is the wise use of our national environment. The preservation of waste and despoilment while preserving, improving, and renewing the quality and usefulness of all our resources. I'm audible, right?
Yes, sir, very much.
Okay. So, World Conservation Strategy defines conservation as the management of human use of biosphere so that it may yield the greatest sustainable benefits to present generation while maintaining its potential to meet the needs and aspirations of future generations also. Okay, so the conservation may be defined as the management for the benefit of all life, including humankind of the biosphere, so that it may yield sustainable benefit to the present generation while maintaining its potential to meet the needs and aspirations of the future generation. So, thus, the conservation is a practice embracing preservation, maintenance, sustainable utilization, restoration, and enhancement of natural environment. Summarily, the true aim of conservation is twofold: preservation of quality of environment and ensuring continuous yield of useful materials, living or non-living, by establishing a balanced cycle of harvest and renewal. The concept of resource conservation has now come under a still wider field of environmental management, which is in the essence the process of allocating natural and also man-made resources so as to make optimum use of the environment in satisfying basic human needs at the minimum and more as far as possible for an indefinite future, and at the same time prevention of depletion and degradation of resources. Need for environmental preservation and conservation, if we see, natural environment is full of resources such as land, water, materials, forest, wildlife, etc. So any material may be termed as a resource provided that an appropriate technology is available to transform that into more valuable goods. Some resources are renewable. For example, trees and fell for wood, original forest covers may be maintained through planting new trees, which is afforestation. So we all know that unless and until we plant more and more trees through what is called afforestation, the act of deforestation, of felling of trees, etc., without afforestation, of planting of trees, will lead to dire consequences. So there are non-renewable exhaustible resources like iron ore, coal, mineral oil, etc. Once they are used in unlimited way, they cannot be easily replaced. So expanding human population resulted in expanding needs of man. With scientific progress and technological development, man started using natural resources at a much larger scale. Continuous increase in population caused an increasing demand for resources. This created situation when non-renewable resources may come to an end after some time. In order to have maximum production, we have started using the resources meant for future that cannot be paid back. As a result, we would be using all those resources which are in fact the property of future generation. The example of ever utilization of resources such as problem of water logging due to over irrigation, and in the same places much of underground water is being utilized for food production, which result in lowering of water table. There is thus need for water conservation. Conservation has been defined as the management for the benefit of all life, including humankind, of the biosphere so that it may yield sustainable benefit to the present generation while maintaining its potential to meet the needs and aspirations of the future generation. So basically, not only for the present generation, this conservation aspect, but also for all future generations. And resource conservation has three specific objectives. If we see, firstly, to maintain essential ecological processes and life support system. So, and secondly, to preserve biological diversity. And thirdly, to ensure that any utilization of species and ecosystems is sustainable. The conservation, therefore, makes important contributions to social and economic development. So, quickly, the resource conservation objectives once again. First is maintaining ecological processes and life support systems. And then biological diversity has to be
Sir,
preserved.
1 minute, sir. Please again repeat, no?
Yeah. So the specific objectives of resource conservation, if we see, there are mainly three aspects. One aspect is maintaining essential ecological processes and life support system. Maintaining essential ecological processes and life support system. Second aspect is to preserve biological diversity. And the third objective is ensuring any utilization of species and ecosystems is sustainable. Okay, so these are the three. So conservation.
Sir, please repeat, sir. Third one.
Third one is ensuring any utilization of species and ecosystems is sustainable. To ensure that any utilization of species and ecosystems is sustainable. That is the third objective with respect to resource conservation. So, conservation makes important contributions to not only economic development but also social development. And the protective methods of environment, if we see, firstly, we'll have to look into the soil aspect, conservation of soil. Soil conservation refers to measures and practices which protect the soil against loss and help in maintaining its fertility with a view to establishing sustainable agriculture. So basically the soil aspect is we need to take care of agriculture sector. It has to be sustainable for future generations. So there is a need to conserve the soil. So basically the practices and the measures that we apply has to ensure that there is no loss of soil, and basically we need to maintain the fertility aspect in the soil. This will only ensure that there is a sustainable agriculture. And principles of soil conservation, if we see, basically soil conservation is based on a certain basic principles. So we'll see the main ones. One is protection of soil from impact of raindrops. So we need to ensure that the rainfall aspect related influence on the soil, there should be enough protection. Second is to slow down the water from concentration and moving down the slope in a narrow path. And then to slow down the water movement when it flows along the slope. And then to ensure more water to enter the soil. And another principle is to encourage to increase the size of soil particle. and also a reduction in the wind velocity near the ground by growing vegetation cover, bridging the land, etc.
Sir, fifth one, what, sir?
To increase the soil particle, the size of the soil particle.
Next, sir.
Reduction in the velocity of the wind near the ground, because the vegetation cover is there, ridging the land.
Sir, sixth point, please repeat, sir.
Reduction in the wind velocity. There should be reduction in the wind velocity near where the vegetation is grown, the ground where the vegetation is grown, the cover of the ground. Okay, and also ridging the land. And
Point,
last,
sir. The second point, please repeat, sir.
the concentration and moving from the slope, this has to be slowed down. Slowing down water from concentration, and the movement of where the slope is there, that movement has to be slowed down. So lastly, the grow so as to grow the strips of stubble or other vegetation cover, which might catch and hold the moving particles of soil.
Sir, please repeat.
The strips of stubble has to be grown. Grow the strips and of stubble or other vegetation cover, which might catch and hold the moving particles of soil. So these are the various principles of conservation of soil. So if we see the methods of soil conservation, basically conservational tillage by incorporating the residues from previous crops into the soil, and organic farming for ensuring organic farming, we have to apply biofertilizers. Okay, organic farming by applying biofertilizers, and crop rotation in successive years on the same piece of land. So and contour plowing with alternate furrows and ridges in the preparation of the field, and by also mulching, which means allowing the soil to remain untilled and cover it with crop residue and other form of plant litter, and also strip cropping by involving planting of crop in rows or strips to check flow of water, and terrace farming by dividing into a number of small flat fields called terraces. So basically terrace farming is also increasing, and lot of following is there for that. And astrological methods by growing grasses to check soil erosion, and afforestation by planting trees in deserts, which check the velocity of wind. So these are the aspects for the methods which will ensure soil conservation. So coming to forest conservation, so as to sustain forest cover, we have to conserve the existing forest and restore the degraded forests. There are certain measures which we have to adopt to conserve forest. So basically one of them is conservation of reserve forests. we need to look into the areas where our water regimes are located, like Himalayas and Western and Eastern Ghats. Okay, because of there are catchment areas there. So also national parks. We have many national parks. Through protecting the and conserving the national parks, will be able to conserve the reserve forests. And we also have sanctuaries, sacred groves are there, biosphere reserves are there, and all ecologically fragile areas we need to conserve. So no commercial exploitation can be allowed in these particular areas, like ghats and national parks, sanctuaries, reserves, and areas which are ecologically fragile. So we need to ensure that there is no exploitation from commercial angle. So there needs to be protection from fuel served villages. There are villages who are they are starved for fuel, and fodder starved cattle, because we see the cattle grazing in areas, because of which also vegetation goes away. So for this we need support from the public, and once we mobilize support from the public, these aspects there can be conservation of reserve forests. Another way of forest conservation is limited production forests. So these forests are less fertile at more than 1,000 meters altitude with hilly topography. A part of annual increment may be harvested in very careful and controlled manner so as to avoid soil and tree damage. And with respect to forest conservation, another aspect is production forests, uh, where the forests on flat land managed for high degree of production. They're working on scientific lines with proper logging techniques, does not pose environmental problems. So effort should aim to generate forests and not plantations. So there are certain aspects through which we can conserve forests in India. So forest dwellers must have access to subsidized source of fuel and fodder, and also building material, so that they can refrain from felling the trees or cutting the trees. And the moratorium, at least to an extent of 1.5 decade or 2 decades on commercial tree fellings in fragile areas of Himalayas and also other hilly areas. There should be a stoppage of felling of trees for 1.5 decade or 2 decades, and massive afforestation programs with people's participation during the moratorium. So when this moratorium is there, during that period, we need to go for afforestation. Modify working plans into environmentally sound action plans based on scientific research. That is also another strategy which we can apply. And community forests around the villages should be managed by people's cooperatives. There should be cooperatives established by which will involve the people, and they should be made around the villages, which will enable that to be like a community forest. So that will also be a good strategy to conserve the forest. And then involvement of masses and volunteers
hear your voice.
So basically, in terms of conserving the forest, we were looking. Also, forests should be protected from a fire. Modern firefighting equipment. I'm audible, right?
Yes, sir. Now,
Yeah. So there was a technical difficulty with the computer. It got disconnected. So, yeah, in terms of firefighting, we need, because there are fire incidents in forests, we need to have the equipment for firefighting so as to extinguish any kind of accidental forest fire, so that conservation of forest is possible instead of spread of the fire. And also the grazing of cattle in the forest should be discouraged. What happens is many villagers who have cattle near forests or community forests, they tend to take the cattle for grazing. So this has to be discouraged. And pests and disease of forest trees should be controlled by fumigation and aerial spray of fungicides and through biological method of pest control. And also the use of firewood should be discouraged, and alternative source of energy for the purposes of cooking. For this we can provide natural gas or biogas. If we make that available, then the habit or the incidence of fire wood being taken for the purpose of fire for cooking, etc., will be not there. So this should be discouraged by providing them with cooking gas, which is natural gas or biogas. Then afforestation should be done in areas unfit for agriculture. So basically, wherever there is less possibility or no possibility for agriculture, such areas they should be afforestation along highways and rivers and around playgrounds and parks. So there was a program also which was there, Vana Mahotsava. So such things should be arranged with involvement of people. A tree removed from the forest for any purpose under pressure must be replaced by a new tree. Therefore, tree felling should be matched by tree planting. We use the word felling for cutting, mentioned earlier also. So FELL. So whenever there's tree felling, immediately there should be tree planting. Such program should be there as early as possible to match the reforestation or afforestation. So another aspect is silviculture practice of conservation. This becomes necessary as it causes faster rate of development of the desired forest, and it also causes uniform stocking and averaged stands. The modern methods of sustainable forest management should be adopted. So these are the various strategies so as to conserve the forests in India. So if you see through law, forest conservation through law is also possible. That is why national forest policy needs. Am I audible? Hello.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir, you are audible.
Yeah, so forest conservation. The policy, which is National Forest Policy 1952, this ensured that one third of the geographical area of the country should be under forests. However, the policy, the National Forest Policy that came in to ensure providing for one third of the complete area in the country, the geographical area, it should be under forest. That's how the policy in 1952, the National Forest Policy, laid down. However, what happened is the continuous deforestation in the country due to various reasons. With the view to conserving forests, the Government of India enacted the Forest Conservation Act 1980. Okay, the Forest Conservation Act 1980. Under this act, prior approval of the central government is required before any reserved forest is declared as de-reserved or forest land is diverted to non-forest purposes.
Recently, is it changed, sir? Percentage?
Pardon?
So recently, is this percentage changed, sir?
Yeah. So from one third to what?
Yeah, sir. One.
Okay. Just a sec. So in terms of the real scenario, is that the forest cover in our country is around 21.71%, and if you see the tree cover, it is 2.91%. So if we add both forest cover and tree cover, as in forest area, geographical area of the forest and the tree cover, it is coming to about around 25%. So that is how the scenario is right now. And if the diversion is permitted, compensatory afforestation is insisted upon, and other suitable conditions would be imposed. So where non-forest area of lands are available, compensatory afforestation will be raised over equivalent area of non-forest lands. So where non-forest lands are not available, compensatory plantations will be raised over degraded forest twice in extent of to the area being diverted. So that is how the legal aspects or requirements are there. So whenever there is permission to have any kind of diversion in this regard, there has to be compensatory afforestation that has to be insisted for that condition will be imposed. And
qualified because they are doing transactions more than 250,000 a year. All such customers.
And actually, where the non-forest lands are, when they are not available, they should be plantations so as to ensure the whatever degradation is there of the forest, to there should be double of it to do the plantations. The Forest Conservation Act was amended in the year. The Act came in 80, in the year 1980, and it was amended in 88 to incorporate strict penal provisions against violators. So, conservational sustainable forest management or afforestation, there are certain aspects in this regard. So the conservational forest management, we have to save the diminishing forest cover, and there is uh, dire need to extensive planting of trees through a forestation program. And to achieve these goals, certain forestry practices have to be implemented in an effective manner for the humankind or mankind survival and also welfare. So the protection or conservation forestry involves protection of degraded forests to allow uh, recoupment of their flora and fauna. And the criteria for sustainable forestry, if we see, first would be maintenance of the forest for their contribution to global carbon cycles. Secondly, maintenance of ecosystems, health and vitality, and maintenance and encouragement of productive functions of forests, and maintenance of biological diversity in forest ecosystem, and maintenance of socio-economic functions and conditions. So similarly, the production or commercial or exploitative forestry aspect is there, and certain other aspects are there in the forestry. Actually, this particular topic is it's a lengthy topic. We need to look at various aspects. Just hold on. This is the third session for you, right? Or is it the fourth session? Fourth session. Okay. Constitution is left, right?
Constitution and family law is left, sir.
Family law.
Okay. So this is the third session then.
Yes, sir.
So I'll just pause for a moment and I'll check with them and I'll let you know whether which one is next and whether they want to start immediately right now.
Okay, sir.
Just hold on.
Okay, sir. It was only for 5 to 10 minutes, but it was not continued. Later on, law of contract ma'am took the class after sanitization.
Okay, so it wasn't constitutional law class.